Hello YouTube, this is Most Wanted here. And I just wanted to show you my ore quarry setup. Ore quarry is a turtle program that allows you to mine selectively. It's the best way to say it, I guess. And it can mine, a single turtle can mine roughly as fast as a quarry can, and for much less power input. And if you put more than one turtle in the same area, then of course you can get more output out of it. What I've got here is for chunk loading purposes only. I've got two quarries laid out, and in the center of those, I've got four turtles. So I'm about 4.5, maybe 5 times faster throughput using turtles over quarries. And if I had four quarries rather than one, then the power requirements of those quarries would be pretty high. It would finish them pretty quickly, but it would totally destroy the landscape. I could do this without destroying the landscape. I could do it without needing huge amounts of power. A lot of people like to throw 100 MJ into a quarry, and this pretty much could potentially use the coal that it mines and still have coal left over powering itself. But I preferred using a different program and filling the turtles up and fuel them with lava buckets, so I don't have the whole fuel chest requirement, which I could potentially put each of these corners here. I could put a chest, and I could have my item ducts do a round robin filling of all of the chests with coal, and then have that coal power the turtles. I use lava to fill them up, and I can show you that later, but this is how I use turtles to do my mining. So this is roughly 4.5, maybe 5 times faster than a quarry. The power requirements are very low, and the tech level of everything is pretty low too. You wouldn't necessarily have to use diamond chests, and if you can chunk load your base, you really only would need an ender chest. But in this particular situation, a situation that maybe some players have, is either you can't or you decide not to chunk load your base all the time, but you do leave the server running. This would allow you to mine all the time while the server's up, without potentially spewing items on the ground when your home base wasn't loaded. So currently, all four turtles attempt to push their items into the diamond chest, and then the first valid location is the ender chest. If I'm online, it'll always be empty or always have space in it, and that'll be the valid location. But if for some reason I'm offline, it will go ahead and move up a notch and look to fill this diamond chest and or this trash can. What ends up going into the trash can is just overburden, which is cobble, dirt, and gravel. And the inverse is true over here. It's blacklisted for overburden blocks. I could add more overburden blocks depending on the mod pack. For instance, I get way more saltpeter than I need. I do like turning saltpeter into gunpowder, and there's uses for gunpowder, like making TNT and other things. So I don't mind the saltpeter. It's just I don't need anywhere near as much as this FTB mod pack gives me. So I could potentially start binning the saltpeter when my base is offline. But just binning the overburden should be enough inventory space between these two diamond chests to handle all of the non-overburden blocks that get mined in this 64 by 64 area. Now I can't do, since there are four turtles, I could potentially do a 32 by 32, but there's no exact center, so I'm kind of forced to do a 31 by 31. And then in reality, I configured it to do only 30 by 30. And what that means is the turtles don't quite cover the exact area that they potentially could, but I don't have to worry about them driving outside of the chunk boundaries at any time and then becoming unloaded. So they're always running and they're always in the chunk. Um, I'm just going to bounce back to the setup one more time. This diamond chest is the last inventory on the chain of pipes, but if I do come online, then both diamond chests, because I've got this item duct here set to output, will both look to output into the ender chest. So when I do pop online, these diamond chests will backflow into the ender chest. And as soon as there's room into the ender chest, then we'll stop sending items to the overburden and just start processing everything that comes through. But back to the turtles, they're much more efficient than quarries on power. They're faster on speed, and let me show you how. This is just a big open area underground where I'm mining, which gives you a really good look at how the turtle mines. It mines basically every third level, and it mines that level out completely regardless what's in it. It does that because it also, while it does that, it mines the levels above it and below it. So you can see here all sorts of crazy looking patterns of rocks are missing out of the other levels, and that's because as the turtle drives, it's looking both above it and below it for anything that's not stone or dirt based on the configuration I gave it, and it'll go ahead and mine out those. So on this level, the turtle mined this block, and below it, it mined this block and this block, so you can actually see straight up through the levels, but it only mines out one level, and then it looks on the levels above and below it. So that's a huge time saver on the time it takes to mine out levels, which is why the turtle can actually properly compete with quarries as far as how long it takes to clear out material. And then you save on the massive amounts of overburden that's sitting here without needing to bother to store it or mine it and store it. And you still get tons of it through the turtles, because they're going to be forced to mine out these levels every third level, and that still ends up being quite a lot. So you don't have to worry too much about the fact that you're getting lots of overburden, because, or you're not getting every bit of the overburden. You're still getting more than you need, really. So that's how they mine, and like I said, they use less charcoal than they mine, so you could still be positive on charcoal. They still mine more coal than they use, so you still would be positive on coal. You could also potentially put 4 ender chests in these corners, configured to the same color, and then you could be making charcoal in your base with a tree farm, and then that tree farm could be feeding the turtles. It wouldn't need to be a very big tree farm because they're not very hungry for charcoal like steam engines, and matter of fact, you probably would go through more charcoal in a single steam engine than these 4 turtles would require to on an hourly basis. So I think you'll find you don't really need a lot to power these guys. And this is just a video to show a working setup with my specific server restriction being that my base isn't always chunk loaded, but my mining area is. And I think it works pretty well. It doesn't destroy the environment. It doesn't create huge lag holes where liquid's falling and it's just filling up with crazy amounts of liquid that's hard to work around, that ends up lagging the server. It doesn't generate massive amounts of overburden you don't need or want, and it mines it so efficiently that it's really hard to beat. I mean, you're still going to get all the overburden blocks that you want, but you're going to get every single one of those valuable ores and diamonds and other stuff that you want out of it. Setup. This is the base side of my ore quarry setup. Here's the ender chest that my turtles will mine into, and since everything mines into the same chest, I kind of have to do a little bit of filtering, and through each stage of my base, a few different things are pulled out and worked over, and then everything else moves on down the line into a different ender chest. So this one ends in a purple, and this one ends in an orange, and there's basically another room that orange items are pulled out, and then it pushes into a green, and then green is where the final sorting happens. This is where I do all my smelting and pulverizing. The I prefer to use the Tinker Construct smeltery because its ability to process ore in parallel. So I think this is set up right now for 36 blocks. It can process 36 blocks at once, and it doesn't require any power whatsoever. All it requires is lava, and the amount of lava it requires is less than it would be in a magmatic running a single furnace. If I was running a magmatic hooked up to maybe a pair of redstone furnaces, I would still burn through more lava than I burn through smelting a similar amount in the smeltery. So it's really super efficient on lava usage, and it smelts in parallel, so you can smelt very quickly in comparison to using machines, even IC2, because there's no limit to how tall you can make this machine, and for every level you make it, you get 9 more blocks worth of 9 more blocks that you can process in parallel fashion. So this is 4 blocks, 4 times 9. That's how many blocks I can smelt at once, but there's no limit to how tall you can make it, and the only limitation you really have is how quick you can pull out the liquids before they mix, because the smeltery uses the Tinker Construct smeltery turns all the metals into liquid, and these liquids could potentially mix and create mixed metal ingots. Like, well, let me show you a couple of them. Some of these I got on accident, some of these I got on purpose. Here's some electrum here, or no, it's aluminum brass. That's required for Tinker's Construct to make the blank plates. Here's some electrum. I plan on doing some stuff that requires it. Here's some bronze, and then ferrous can mix with iron, and it makes another block, Invar. And then I mix some of those manually on purpose, but it's not that difficult to automate this guy, because as you can see here, I've got no spouts. There's no spouts hooked up to this machine whatsoever. The only thing I've hooked up to remove liquid are these extra utilities liquid transfer nodes, and these can pull out liquids pretty quick. There's a low chance, based on the size, that metals are going to mix. And because I send everything to a chest first, I can sort the chest to prevent silver and gold from mixing, from tin and copper from mixing, and ferrous and iron. Although I don't even smelt ferrous in here. And then I believe there's a mix with aluminum and some other things, copper and something else that makes the aluminum brass. But I don't have to worry about those mixing, because I don't create a huge smeltery, and I pull out liquids extremely quickly with a pair of those transfer nodes. But if you were going to go to the extreme on this setup, say you were going to make it big enough to smelt an entire stack of something, and then you have to worry about how I'm going to store the liquid once I pull it out and be able to pull it out quick enough, there might be a need to create a second smeltery of just those ores that could potentially mix. So you could pull out the copper, you could pull out the gold, and you could pull out the ferrous or the iron into a second smeltery and smelt just those ores in the second smeltery without needing to worry about whether they're going to mix, because they'll never mix, because they're never smelted in the same smeltery. And then you could potentially have a third smeltery just for smelting on purpose manually your mixed metal ingots. And below here, this little hatch here, I've got the rest of the setup. which has these extra utilities transfer pipes. And the reason why I'm using extra utilities is the fluid ducts can't filter fluids. I believe there is a block, I don't know if it's available in this version of FTB, that can filter fluids, but this is a much simpler way of filtering fluids. I just right click on this, I create these item filters. These are filter pipes, which really are just made of, it's a regular pipe with dies, which makes it really simple and cheap. And then these item filters are redstone, sticks, and string, which are really simple and cheap too. And then you can use these to filter liquid. It says molten copper bucket, but in reality it's a source block of molten copper that I've got in there, and it knows it can push copper. I think it's down green, and copper will always go down this direction. So I don't have to worry about, if I use fluid ducts, I couldn't sort the liquid properly, so I'd have to have lots of basins where they could have random levels and random versions of different liquids. I don't have to worry about that here, because the same liquid is always going to go in the same direction and go down to the same basin. So if you look at my basins here, I have different colored liquids, and they're always going to be they don't always have to be exactly what's required for a full block, because if there's some left over, it will just sit in the basin until more appears, and as soon as it appears, it fills, it turns into a block, and then you saw that block just vanish. It's probably because there's a decent amount of liquid in there. So it instantly fills, and then a few ticks later it turns into a block, and then it disappears, and then it'll instantly fill again if there's enough liquid in the transfer node. And another reason why I'm not using fluid ducts instead of I'm not using fluid ducts, I'm using the transfer nodes, is the transfer nodes by themselves can hold 8 buckets worth of liquid. So as liquid starts filling into the tank, it gets pulled into the transfer node, and it pulls up to 8 buckets worth. So I have a combination of storage capacity here of the 16 buckets in the tank, and then another 8 in the transfer node. I could potentially use thermal expansion mod. It's got some really high per bucket tanks. Pull them up here. They have these like reinforced and resident. Resident holds like 64 buckets worth. I could potentially replace these tanks with residents, and they wouldn't take up any more space, and they would be able to hold more in a setup that would have more throughput than I have currently. I could potentially do that, but the combination of these two blocks can hold up to 18 blocks worth of metal. So, and 18 blocks where each block is 9 ingots. That's a lot of metal that these two can store. And then of course the basin can store up to a single block as well. So it's a lot of liquid that can be stored. It could even potentially backfill into those two liquid transfer nodes upstairs, and that's another 8 buckets each. So if it ever did get full, then there would be a lot of storage in the process. And if enough liquid does come in, these things turn blocks pretty quickly. If the tank is full, then it'll always be able to push enough liquid to top off the transfer node, regardless of how quickly the basin's running. And then the basin basically fills in a tick or so. It takes about a second to fill the basin, about another second if there's no tick lag to turn the liquid into a block, and about another second based on my other mod that's pulling the blocks out to pull it out. So it takes about 3 seconds to make a block when the server's running quickly, and they can do that at that rate until the liquid's removed completely from both the node and the tank. So it can push through it and create blocks really quickly. All the blocks are being pulled out not by transfer nodes, but by this guy right here, which is a retrieval node, and he basically acts like a Bluetricity retriever. And I use the retriever just because the retriever would require less materials. I could potentially use item ducts at this point too, though, and that would be a viable option as well. I just, when I created this setup, I didn't have any item ducts yet, and I didn't have a lot of lead, so I went with what I already had on hand. And although the retrieval node is pretty expensive, it's doable. All you need is, I think, a single, the hardest part is a single emerald. And the rest of this is very inexpensive. It's just making the seared ingots for the seared for the smeltery, and for the basins. The tanks are just made of glass. These transfer nodes are just like up from item nodes, and it doesn't use all that much in materials. It's fairly early game materials, so it's not something that would require a huge stockpile of materials to be able to make. Everything pretty much gets pulled out of this ender chest through the filter into the gold chest, and then it feeds into the smeltery. Smeltery pulls out everything liquid-based into those tanks below, and then into the basins, and then the basins get emptied by the retrieval node into that second, hard time going down, into that second ender chest, which is marked orange, and then pretty much everything else comes out of this end through this item duct that isn't one of the ores. And I'm not actually smelting ferrous here, although I could. It's a potential to become a mixed metal ingot, becomes Invar, or I have zero chance of getting shiny ingots, so I'm not using the smeltery for ferrous. I'm manually using that. A pulverizer here is receiving all the Vietnam ore, even though I'm not using that. I can still turn it into dust, and I can turn the dust into blocks, and it takes less space, and then I can trade it for something else that's more useful to someone that uses that mod. And then here I'm using the dark iron, I'm processing the dark iron ore, and then all that outputs underneath the bottom, and then into this ender chest. Anything that comes through that isn't in one of those two items also ends up in the inner chest. And then it just moves on to the next section of my base, which I might just go ahead and show you now. Why not? This is kind of my take on an Ender Fortress in the overworld. It's kind of different, but here is another ender chest. This one's marked orange, and this is where everything comes out from the smeltery. All the smeltery ingot blocks come through here, as well as everything else that comes through the turtles. And it's configured to use these really cheap and easy to make factorization packagers. And what the packagers are good at is taking items that can be turned into blocks and doing that. So for instance, here's some topaz. 9 topaz can be turned into a block. 9 shimmerite can be turned into a block, and 9 Vietnam ore can be turned into a block. As well as, this is cobblestone. I'm actually double compressing cobblestone here. I'm double compressing dirt and gravel. Here I'm making redstone blocks using redstone. I'm also in the back here, I'm doing, I think this is diamond, and this is the dark iron. 9 dark iron equals a dark iron block. And then 4 Certus quartz gives you a Certus quartz block. And of course you can do that with nether quartz as well, but since I'm not mining it automatically, I'm making the blocks manual. Here I'm making lapis blocks. So most of these these packages work with anything that's a 2x2 or a 3x3 pattern using the same material. They use 0 power, and they can produce they can produce a block a second or so, and they output via their bottoms. So I've got some more pipes going here, and then I've got a retrieval node that's just like in the liquid retrieval node. This is an item-based retrieval node that's pulling the items out of the bottom of most of these packagers. It's doing the 3 in the back, it's doing the 3 along that back wall, and it's doing these 4 at the bottom here. These 3 stay in this section of the base because I don't use these ores in any for any crafting, so I figure I'll just leave them here. Same goes for these. I don't use these on a regular basis. The sulfur and the saltpeter I use for making TNT, or not TNT, for making gunpowder. Gunpowder can be used for TNT and a lot of other things. Everything else gets passed through. So what's coming into this chest is everything from the quarry plus all my smelted blocks. So there's no ore coming through here, just the smelted blocks, and then everything else. And then all that overburden is getting doubly compressed, and then all the like redstone and other items are being compressed into blocks. So there's a lot of compression going on here that reduces storage waste, because at this point in the game I haven't created AE, so I don't have storage drives and all other stuff. I could potentially have created AE already, but I haven't. And all that moves into this green chest, and the green chest ends up down here. Getting a bit of lag here, it's really annoying. It's my client, it's not the server though. And then everything comes through here. At the rate it comes through here is very much reduced compared to what it comes through at the quarry. So everything comes just in as a trickle in comparison. And there's another transfer node here that goes along the back of all of these barrels, and I use a filter pipe to, not a filter pipe, a sorting pipe, and it'll sort items, and it snakes along the bottom of each of these, comes up through the next level, and then snakes up to the next level, and it works its way up until it reaches this block here. And then I have a single deep storage unit here for charcoal, because I have a tree farm that I'll show you in a second that is producing charcoal for me. And what I plan on doing is outputting that into another ender chest to power some engines remotely somewhere else in the base. And then this is the final destination. If a barrel somewhere gets overflowed, or I manually put some random stuff in the inventory, like you saw me put those in the inventory earlier, then they'll end up in this chest, and I could just dump it into a barrel and then worry about it later. So, and these up at the very top here, these 2 rows are just manual entry barrels for whatever I need to throw up there. And that's pretty much it. I have a tree farm downstairs. I'm going to walk off it before I can start flying. And then I just have a harvester and a gold chest there. It could potentially just be a regular chest, but it's a gold at the moment. Let's see, I should be able to go down. And this is really some of the true benefits of the extra utilities. Upstairs near the smeltery, I don't really make much use of it. But I think really good use of it here. You see here there's one pipe coming through with a transfer node, but I'm also transferring power along the same pipe into the harvester. So the harvester could also potentially send the sludge back through. If I set up a liquid transfer node here, it could also power, so I could have sludge going this way, power going this way, and then items from the harvester going down this way. It backfeeds a planter, which plants the trees, and then it all ends up in this setup here, which is where I'm turning the items into more helpful things. I'll show you in a second. Okay, so break that block there, and you see I've got another ender chest with a filter, so everything that's not to be smelted ends up going into that ender chest, and then it goes upstairs. That's a green chest where it takes into the sorting setup. So these furnaces are smelting the oak wood. If I decided to plant some rubber trees, it would also smelt the rubber wood and the rubber as well. All I would need to do is throw a stack of rubber trees in the planter real quick, or manually plant some rubber trees, and it would give me a decent amount of rubber without too much work. Then all the output from the redstone furnaces come around to the tops of these steam dynamos, which are receiving water from aqueous accumulator below, and then they're being topped off with charcoal. All that's going into a hardened energy conduit into this hardened energy cell, which is feeding not only the planter and the harvest over there, but my plan is to have it feed another harvester that's going to be producing another type of power for me. Well, it's going to be creating a fuel that I'm going to turn into power. So I'm not quite using the charcoal yet, other than to feed and power the charcoal farm. This is going to be, it's already full grown, I just haven't set up everything yet. This has got another harvester here that is going to be, well, it's already pushing out random stuff. I haven't upgraded this guy yet, but he's going to be harvesting all of this here. I've got pumpkins, potatoes, carrots, netherwort. This is melons, and then dandelions and roses. These are all cropped, and what happens is when the harvester harvests the material on the crop, it leaves the plant. So I don't actually have, in the center here, I don't actually have a planter. I was going to configure one, but then I realized I could pretty much crop everything that's here, and I don't have to worry about it. And what this is going to give me is it's going to give me 7 types of feedstock for a the factorization mod. What is it called? That's not factorization, it's Mind Factory. It's not the biofuel generator, it's the bioreactor. The bioreactor can generate biofuel, the purple stuff made from factorization, I think? I forget exactly what mod, but it can produce the biofuel without requiring power. So I'll just be able to push all the feedstock directly into the machine, and then a biofuel will come out, and I can throw it into a tank, and then burn it, of course. I can even, using another Mind Factory reloaded block, turn it into ethanol. Ethanol can be used for, ethanol can be burned in a steam boiler, or it can be used to power a biogenerator, which creates EU. Also, the biofuel can be used in a couple different engines as well. So I have 2 different types of liquids from one setup that can create EU or MJ with. And this is probably about as big of a farm as I'm going to need to do what I want to do with it. Which I believe this is 13 by 13 or something like that. And you wouldn't believe how efficient this is actually ended up being. I've had a bigger farm on another server that produced way more than I needed, although I haven't even on that server really done a lot with it. The only thing is, you don't have to come in here and do anything with it. This will run itself as long as there's enough light and the water sources stay true, that you don't ever have to come down here and to do anything with it. I've got water sources running along the back sides of these walls, underneath these walls actually, and then a single water source in the center, and that's making sure that all of this land stays tilled and the crops stay inside them. If for some reason the light source drops, some of these plants will pop out of their crops, or if or weeds will crop in, or if there's not enough water, then it'll become untilled, and then the crops themselves, the crop sticks themselves will pop out along with the plants. But as long as all that stays static and steady, then you really don't have to worry about this farm whatsoever. It's all pretty much automated, and you can just leave it alone. I just haven't quite finished it yet, but that's what I plan on doing next, is producing some biofuel, which I can turn into ethanol, and I don't even need to use power to create the biofuel. I don't need to use power to create the ethanol. And then both of those offer me the ability to generate EU and MJ really easily, and I'll probably be showing you that in a later, much later video. So, thanks for watching. I just wanted to show you a couple of the setups that I had in the base. I use a lot of the inner chest. None of these four sections of the base are directly connected at all. They're all powered or completely not requiring power. So, for instance, this section, I have all this sorting going on, and there's no machines to power at all. And this machine, all these packagers and sorting and barrels and stuff, none of this actually requires power. And the smeltery just requires lava, and one lava engine handles both the pulverized and the redstone. So I'm not really using any of the power I'm generating right now through the charcoal, other than the power of the farm that creates it. But I'll probably use the charcoal to power the biofuel farm, and then the biofuel I use to power other more advanced machines. When I go into AE, then it'll power the AE machines themselves. It'll power the machines that will be doing the automated crafting, things like that. I wanted to potentially have this section be power generation, and then Extra Utilities offers me the ability to transmit wirelessly the MJ power, or I could set up test racks as well. And then this room was going to be AE and automation, things like that. So then I can continue to occupy this corner, which is mostly just crafting. So I'll get more advanced crafting tables. I'll be able to remove the barrels, put all that inventory into the AE system over time, and that's kind of like my future advanced plans. Get a power suit and some other things, but I'm still pretty early game, even though I've been on the server for a while. And yeah, so that's my setup on this particular server, and I want to thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions or comments about the setup, or any idea how I can improve it, then please let me know. Otherwise, yeah, thanks for watching.